The derelict colony ship loomed in the void like a phantom from another age, its colossal hull frosted over with a century of ice. The Erebus, humanity's first interstellar ark, was thought lost to the black after it vanished 100 years ago, along with its 10,000 colonists. No distress signal, no debris, just silence, until last week, when the ship mysteriously reappeared in the outer reaches of the Epsilon Eridani system, adrift and lifeless. The message from the Directorate was clear: board the ship, recover the data logs, and report back. Was it ghosts or aliens? Joked Dr. Hallie Voss, the mission's exobiologist, as she suited up in the cramped confines of the Aegis airlock. Her voice wavered just enough to betray her unease. "It's frozen corpses, Hallie," muttered Reyes, their no-nonsense pilot. 10,000 of 'em. So let's get in, get out, and leave the spooks behind. Commander Isaac Cole, a battle-hardened veteran of frontier wars, stood at the helm, his icy blue eyes scanning the monitors as their shuttle approached the Erebus. The ship dwarfed their craft, its skeletal superstructure coated in frost, solar sails tattered and frayed. A massive rend in its hull gaped like a wound, revealing a dark abyss within. "Focus," Cole ordered, his voice cutting through the tension. "We stick to the mission. Secure the bridge, retrieve the logs, and get out. No heroics." The Aegis shuddered as it docked with the Erebus. The docking clamps groaned, struggling to find purchase on the ice-encrusted hull. Hallie's nervous chatter ceased, replaced by the rhythmic hum of their pressurized suits and the thrum of their heartbeat monitors. When the airlock door hissed open, they were met with a wall of frost-coated silence. The corridors beyond were unlit, save for the flickering beams of their helmet lamps. Ice clung to every surface, distorting what once had been sleek metal walls. Frost-crusted signage pointed toward habitation decks, engine bays, and the command bridge. "Reyes, keep the Aegis hot," Cole said. "Voss, Grant, you're with me. We move to the bridge, fast and clean. No distractions." Reyes gave a mock salute before sealing the airlock behind them. "I'll babysit the ship. Don't take too long, Commander." The team ventured into the bowels of the Erebus. Their boots crunched against ice-covered grates, and every step echoed unnaturally, as if the ship itself were holding its breath. The temperature dropped further the deeper they went. Frost curled like tendrils across the walls, and their breath fogged inside their helmets despite the heated suit. "Radiators must be completely shot," Hallie muttered, running her gloved hand over a frozen console. "This place is a cryochamber." "Better that than a furnace," Grant, the team's engineer, replied. His voice was steady, but his eyes darted nervously to every shadow. They rounded a corner, entering what had once been a common area. Tables and chairs were upended, frozen to the floor. The remains of long-perished plants drooped in shattered planters. And then they saw them, figures encased in ice. Humanoid forms huddled together, frozen mid-motion, their faces twisted in expressions of terror. One held a child in its arms, its eyes wide with panic, forever locked in time. "What the hell happened here?" Hallie whispered, her voice barely audible over the sound of her breathing. Cole stepped closer, his rifle at the ready. He studied the ice-encased forms, the way the frost had almost organically overtaken their bodies. "Doesn't matter. Stay focused." But as they moved deeper, the anomalies grew more unsettling. A section of the ship's corridor was warped, the walls twisted and stretched as though some great force had pulled the metal like taffy. Frozen corpses littered the path, some missing limbs, others reduced to skeletal remains with their flesh perfectly preserved in the frost. "Commander," Grant called from ahead. "You're gonna want to see this." They approached a bulkhead door. Its thick, reinforced steel had been torn open from the inside, jagged edges protruding outward. Beyond was a chamber that made Hallie's stomach churn. The frost-covered floor was slick with a dark substance, blood frozen solid. The walls were clawed, deep gouges running in jagged lines. And at the center of the room lay a hulking mass of ice, something vaguely humanoid but grotesquely twisted, its limbs unnaturally long and sharp. "What is that?" Hallie asked, her voice trembling. Not human, Cole said, his tone flat. He motioned for Grant to scan it. Grant hesitated, but a sharp look from the commander spurred him into action. He approached cautiously, his scanner whirring to life. Organic partially. But it's corrupted. Some kind of biomechanical integration. Before he could finish, the ship lurched violently. An ear-piercing groan echoed through the corridors, and the lights flickered. The team stumbled as the floor shifted beneath them. Reyes! Cole barked over the comms. Status! The pilot's voice came through, panicked. Something's moving, Commander! The ship, its systems, they're waking up? As if on cue, a low, resonant hum filled the air. The ice around them began to crack and shift, steam rising as it melted unnaturally fast. The air grew warmer, thick with an acidic tang that stung their throats even through the filters. The corpse at the room's center twitched, its frozen limbs jerking spasmodically. Move! Cole shouted, yanking Grant back as the creature's arm lashed out, shattering the ice that encased it. The team bolted down the corridor, the ship groaning and creaking as if alive. Behind them came the sound of claws scraping against metal and guttural, inhuman screeches that echoed through the labyrinthine halls. What the hell is that thing? Hallie screamed, her legs burning as she sprinted. Keep moving! Cole ordered. Get to the bridge. They stumbled into the command center, slamming the door shut behind them. Grant locked it, his hands trembling. The sound of the creature's pursuit grew louder, followed by heavy impacts against the door. Will that hold? Hallie asked, her voice shaking. Grant shook his head. Not for long. Cole ignored them, striding to the central console. The bridge was an eerie contrast to the rest of the ship, pristine, untouched by ice. Panels glowed faintly, their systems humming with a faint energy. What are you doing? Hallie asked. Finding out what happened, Cole said, inserting a data probe into the console. The logs began to download, streams of data flashing across the screens. The pounding on the door intensified, and the metal began to buckle. We're out of time, Commander! Grant shouted. Then the door gave way. The creature burst into the room, its grotesque form illuminated in the glow of the bridge. Its head was elongated, its jaw filled with serrated teeth, and its limbs ended in razor-sharp claws. It let out a guttural roar and charged. Cole opened fire, the plasma bolts scorching its carapace but not stopping it. Hallie and Grant joined in, their shots ricocheting off its armor-like skin. Focus fire! Cole shouted. Aim for the joints! The creature shrieked as a bolt struck its leg, sending it sprawling. But it was relentless, clawing its way toward them even as they unloaded their weapons. Commander! Hallie yelled, pointing at the console. The data transfer was complete. Cole grabbed the probe and shouted, Fall back to the shuttle! The team sprinted for the exit, the creature hot on their heels. The corridors were alive with the sounds of the ship groaning and shifting, as though the Erebus itself were fighting them. The frost was gone, replaced by pulsating walls that seemed to breathe. They reached the airlock just as the creature lunged, its claws slashing inches from Grant's back. Reyes opened fire from the shuttle, his shots finally forcing the thing to retreat. Get us out of here! Cole barked as they piled into the Aegis. The shuttle undocked, the thrusters roaring to life as Reyes pulled them away from the ship. Through the viewport, they watched as the Erebus seemed to pulsate, its derelict form no longer still but shifting unnaturally. What the hell just happened? Hallie panted, collapsing into her seat. Cole didn't answer. He inserted the data probe into the shuttle's console, grimacing as the logs began to decrypt. What did you find? Reyes asked, his voice grim. Cole stared at the screen, his expression dark. This wasn't an accident, he said finally. The Erebus didn't just vanish. Something took it. And now? It's coming back. The shuttle's alarms blared suddenly, and the team turned to see the Erebus in the distance, its engines roaring to life. It's waking up, Hallie whispered in horror. And then, the rift opened. The rift bloomed in the void like a wound in space-time, a swirling vortex of light and shadow that seemed to devour everything around it. Colors impossible to describe twisted and bent, warping the fabric of reality. The Erebus, once lifeless and adrift, surged toward the anomaly, its massive engines burning with unnatural energy. The crew of the Aegis watched in stunned silence as the derelict colony ship came alive, a leviathan awakening from its frozen tomb. "What the hell is happening?" Hallie gasped, her voice trembling as she clung to her seat. Cole's jaw tightened, his eyes locked on the viewscreen. "It's not just alive, it's reacting to the rift. The Erebus is moving like it's being piloted," Reyes said, his hands flying across the controls. "But there's no way anyone survived 100 years in that frozen hell." "Something survived," Grant muttered. "We saw it." The shuttle shuddered violently, alarms blaring as the rift's gravity began pulling them in. The Erebus was accelerating, its trajectory locked on the heart of the anomaly. "Reyes, get us clear," Cole barked. "I'm trying, Commander," Reyes snapped, wrestling with the controls. "The rift's gravity is off the charts. It's dragging us in." The Aegis strained against the pull, its thrusters burning at full capacity. The crew felt the pressure mounting, the gravitational forces pressing them into their seat. Outside, the rift grew larger, its chaotic maelstrom engulfing their view. Then, the Erebus sent out a signal. It wasn't a transmission in any conventional sense. It was a pulse, a deep, resonant wave that seemed to reverberate through their bones. The lights in the shuttle flickered, and the air grew cold. "What was that?" Hallie asked, her voice rising in panic. Grant frantically scanned the readouts. "That pulse, it's rewriting the ship's systems. Our instruments are glitching out." "It's more than that," Cole said grimly. "It's trying to pull us back in." Suddenly, the rift surged, and a tendril of black energy lashed out, striking the Aegis. The shuttle rocked violently, systems shorting out as sparks flew from the consoles. "We're hit," Reyes shouted. "Shields are failing. Brace yourselves," Cole yelled. The shuttle was yanked toward the Erebus, its thrusters sputtering as the black tendril coiled around the hull like a serpent. The crew was thrown from their seats as the Aegis was slammed against the Erebus docking bay. The impact was deafening, and for a moment everything went dark. Cole groaned as he came to, the taste of blood in his mouth. Emergency lights bathed the shuttle in a dim red glow, and the air was thick with smoke. "Everyone, sound off," he rasped, forcing himself to his feet. "Alive," Hallie coughed, clutching her side. "Mostly." "Same," Grant said, wincing as he checked his arm, which hung limp at his side. Reyes groaned from the pilot's chair, blood trickling down his forehead. "I've had better landings." Cole surveyed the wreckage. The Aegis was crippled, its systems fried. The docking bay doors of the Erebus loomed ahead, faintly glowing with an eerie light. "We're back on the ship," Hallie said, her voice shaking. "How the hell are we back on the ship?" "It dragged us in," Cole said, his tone grim. He grabbed his rifle, checking the charge. "And it's not letting us leave." "We're sitting ducks here," Grant said. "We need to find a way to restore the shuttle or signal for help." Cole nodded. "Agreed. But first, we need to find out what's controlling this ship. Whatever's causing this, it's coming from the rift, and the Erebus is the key." Reluctantly, the team suited up once more, venturing out of the shattered shuttle. The docking bay was in pristine condition, a stark contrast to the frozen wreckage they had explored earlier. The frost was gone, replaced by smooth, gleaming surfaces that pulsed faintly with a dark, organic light. "This isn't right," Hallie whispered, her eyes wide as she examined the walls. "It's like the ship is alive." "It's been changed," Grant said, running his hand over the pulsating metal. "This isn't human engineering. The rift, it's infected the Erebus." As they moved deeper into the ship, the temperature rose steadily. The air felt heavy, oppressive, and the faint hum of the ship's systems had grown into a low, rhythmic thrum, like the heartbeat of a slumbering giant. Suddenly, a piercing shriek echoed through the corridor. The team froze, their weapons drawn. "Movement," Cole said, his voice low. "Eyes up." The sound of scuttling claws grew louder, echoing from the walls and ceiling. Shadows danced in the flickering light, and then they saw them, creatures emerging from the darkness. Smaller than the one they'd encountered on the bridge but no less grotesque, these abominations moved with terrifying speed, their elongated limbs ending in razor-sharp claws. "Contact!" Cole shouted, opening fire. The corridor erupted in chaos as the creatures swarmed. Plasma bolts lit up the darkness, tearing through the first wave of attackers, but more kept coming. Their shrieks were deafening, their movements erratic and unpredictable. "They're everywhere!" Hallie screamed, firing wildly as one of the creatures lunged at her. It hit the ground inches from her feet, its body convulsing as it died. "Hold the line," Cole ordered. "Grant, seal that bulkhead!" Grant sprinted to the control panel, frantically working to override the door mechanism. "I need time." "We don't have time," Reyes shouted, slamming the butt of his rifle into a creature that got too close. The bulkhead door groaned, then slammed shut with a resounding clang, cutting off the swarm. The team panted, their suits streaked with blood and ichor. "What the hell were those things?" Hallie asked, her voice trembling. "Mutations," Grant said, his face pale. "The colonists, they've been changed." "Into what?" Hallie asked. "Into soldiers," Cole said grimly. "For whatever's controlling this ship." The team pressed on, their nerves frayed but their resolve unbroken. They reached the command deck once more, but this time, it was different. The once pristine room was now overrun with organic growths, black tendrils snaking across the walls and floor. At the center of the room stood a massive, pulsating structure, a biomechanical heart, its every beat sending tremors through the ship. "This is it," Cole said. "This is the source." As they approached, the structure seemed to react, its surface shifting and contorting. A voice filled the room, not spoken but felt, reverberating in their minds. "You should not have come," Hallie gasped, clutching her head. "It's in my mind." "We end this now," Cole shouted, raising his rifle. But as they opened fire, the heart began to change. It split open, revealing a creature far larger and more grotesque than anything they had encountered. Its form was a nightmare, a writhing mass of limbs and eyes, its maw filled with rows of serrated teeth. "Brace yourselves," Cole yelled. The battle was on, and the heart of the Erebus was far from defenseless. The creature loomed over them, its impossible form twisting and writhing as if it couldn't decide on a single shape. Its maw opened, releasing an otherworldly screech that sent shivers down their spines. The room vibrated with its presence, the biomechanical heart pulsing in rhythm with the deafening sound. "Move!" Cole shouted, diving to the side as a massive tendril lashed out, smashing into the deck where he had stood moments before. Hallie and Reyes opened fire, their plasma rounds striking the creature's shifting mass. The bolts tore into its flesh, but the wounds healed almost instantly, the corrupted tissue stitching itself back together in a grotesque display. "It's regenerating!" Grant yelled, scrambling behind a console for cover. "We can't fight this thing head-on," Cole shouted. He fired another shot, aiming for what looked like a cluster of glowing, vulnerable nodes near its core. The creature roared in pain, momentarily recoiling. "Aim for the nodes. Target its weak points." The team coordinated their fire, focusing on the exposed node. Each hit caused the creature to thrash violently, its tendrils flailing in blind fury. One tendril slammed into Reyes, sending him flying across the room. He hit the wall with a sickening thud and collapsed in a heap. "Reyes!" Hallie screamed, but she couldn't reach him. Another tendril was already arcing toward her. Cole tackled her to the ground just in time, the tendril whipping overhead and slicing clean through a nearby console. Sparks erupted as the room plunged further into chaos. The biomechanical heart throbbed faster now, the creature growing more aggressive with each passing moment. "Grant," Cole barked, "find a way to shut this thing down. There has to be a failsafe." "I'm working on it," Grant shouted back, frantically tapping at a console that flickered with distorted data streams. But this system isn't just alien, it's alive. It's fighting me. The creature shifted its focus, sensing the threat. A massive limb struck the console Grant was using, sending him sprawling. Sparks flew as the console exploded, the impact knocking him unconscious. "Grant's down," Hallie cried, firing at the creature to draw its attention. Cole cursed under his breath. The situation was spiraling out of control. They were outmatched, outgunned, and running out of time. The ship itself seemed to be reacting to their presence, the walls and floor writhing as if alive. "We need a new plan," Hallie shouted, her voice desperate. Cole's mind raced. The creature wasn't just protecting the heart, it was the heart. The rift's corruption had fused with the Erebus, turning the ship into a living organism. If they couldn't destroy the creature, they'd have to destroy the heart, and the ship along with it. "Hallie, we're going to overload the reactor," Cole said, his voice firm. "It's the only way to stop this." Her eyes widened in disbelief. "You're talking about blowing up the entire ship?" "It's already lost," Cole said, grabbing her by the shoulder. "If we don't do this, that thing will spread. It'll reach the rift, and who knows what happens then?" Hallie hesitated, then nodded. "What do you need me to do?" "Cover me while I get Reyes and Grant out of here. Then we head for the engine room." The creature roared again, its form shifting as it grew larger, more monstrous. It lashed out with renewed fury, its tendrils tearing through the room. Cole sprinted toward Reyes, grabbing the pilot and hauling him over his shoulder. "I've got Reyes." Hallie grabbed Grant. Hallie darted toward Grant, narrowly avoiding another tendril. She reached him and heaved his unconscious form onto her back, gritting her teeth against the strain. "Go!" Cole shouted, firing at the creature to keep it distracted. The team retreated down the corridor, the creature's roars echoing behind them. The ship seemed to respond to their escape, the walls pulsing and shifting as if trying to trap them. "This place is falling apart," Hallie yelled, struggling under Grant's weight. "It's not falling apart, it's alive," Cole said, his voice grim. "And it doesn't want us to leave." They reached the engine room, a sprawling chamber filled with towering machinery and glowing conduit. The air was thick with heat, the hum of the reactors deafening. Cole set Reyes down gently, checking his pulse. "He's alive, but we need to move fast." Hallie laid Grant on the floor, shaking him awake. "Grant, we need you." Grant groaned, his eyes fluttering open. What happened?" "No time to explain," Cole said. "We're overloading the reactor." "How do we do it?" Grant blinked, his mind still foggy, but he forced himself to focus. "The main coolant system. If we shut it down, the core will overheat and detonate. But it'll give us only a few minutes to get clear." "Then let's do it," Cole said. Grant stumbled to his feet, guiding them to the reactor's control panel. His hands shook as he worked, bypassing the alien systems that had fused with the ship's original architecture. "Almost." "There," Grant muttered, sweat dripping down his face. The creature's roar echoed through the corridors, growing louder. It was coming. "Grant, hurry!" Hallie urged, her eyes darting to the entrance. "Got it!" Grant shouted. The control panel flashed red as alarms blared. "Coolant system offline. The core's going critical. Let's move," Cole ordered. The team sprinted down the corridor, the walls warping and contorting around them. The ship was fighting back, tendrils of black energy lashing out from the walls. One caught Hallie's leg, pulling her to the ground. "Hallie!" Cole turned and fired, severing the tendril. He pulled her to her feet and they kept running. Behind them, the creature appeared, its form now filling the corridor. Its limbs scraped against the walls as it pursued them, its roars shaking the ship. The team reached the docking bay, only to find the Aegis still crippled. Smoke and sparks filled the air, and the ship's systems were offline. "We're out of time," Hallie yelled. "The reactor's about to blow." Cole's mind raced. They had no ship, no escape, and the creature was closing in. But then he saw it, an escape pod, nestled in the corner of the bay. "There!" Cole shouted, pointing. The team piled into the pod, Grant and Hallie working frantically to activate the launch sequence. The controls sputtered, barely functional, but the pod's engines roared to life. The team piled into the pod, Grant and Hallie working frantically to activate the launch sequence. The controls sputtered, barely functional, but the pod's engines roared to life. The creature burst into the docking bay, its massive form blotting out the light. It lunged for the pod, but Cole fired one last shot, hitting the control panel for the bay doors. The blast sent the creature reeling as the doors slammed shut behind it. The escape pod launched, hurtling into the void. Behind them, the Erebus began to glow, the reactor reaching critical mass. As the rift consumed the colony ship, a brilliant explosion tore through the void, the light of the detonation swallowing the Erebus and the horrors within. The pod was thrown into the blackness, spinning out of control. Inside, the team clung to their seats, battered and bruised but alive. "We made it," Hallie whispered, her voice shaky. "For now," Cole said, his gaze fixed on the rift, which remained undisturbed, its ominous presence unchanged. The escape pod floated in silence, spinning aimlessly in the abyss. The explosion of the Erebus had illuminated the rift for a brief, horrifying moment, but now the darkness had returned, swallowing everything in its grasp. The glow of the pod's interior lights flickered as its systems struggled to stabilize. Cole leaned back, catching his breath. His body ached from the battle, and every muscle screamed in protest. Hallie sat across from him, cradling her injured leg, her face pale but determined. Grant was slumped over the console, frantically working to restore some semblance of control to the pod. Reyes stirred, groaning as he regained consciousness. Where are we?" "Alive, barely," Cole said, his voice strained. "The Erebus is gone. We overloaded the reactor." Reyes nodded slowly, his eyes dark with exhaustion. "Did we stop it? The creature?" For a moment nobody answered. The truth hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. "The ship's gone," Hallie finally said. "But the rift is still there. And whatever was inside it. I don't think we destroyed it." The pod systems beeped as Grant managed to regain partial control. "I've got limited thrusters and life support. No comms, though. We're still adrift." Cole stared out the viewport at the swirling anomaly of the rift. It pulsed with an otherworldly energy, as though mocking their efforts. The creature may have been a manifestation of its power, but it wasn't the source. They hadn't defeated it. They had barely escaped it. "Where do we go now?" Hallie asked, her voice tinged with desperation. "Anywhere but here," Cole said. "Grant, can we put distance between us and the rift?" Grant nodded, his fingers flying across the console. "I'll do my best. But without a proper navigation system, we're flying blind." The pod's engines sputtered to life, propelling them away from the rift. The team fell into a tense silence, each of them lost in their own thoughts. The faint hum of the pod's systems was the only sound, a fragile reminder of their survival. But the silence didn't last. A faint static crackled through the pod's speakers, breaking the stillness. Cole's heart sank as he exchanged a wary glance with Hallie. "What is that?" Reyes asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Grant frowned, adjusting the controls. "I don't know. The comms are supposed to be offline." The static grew louder, interspersed with faint whispers. Words, distorted and alien, began to form. "It's still here," the voice said, low and guttural, yet eerily familiar. "You cannot escape." The pod shuddered violently, the lights flickering as if responding to the voice. Cole's hand instinctively went to his sidearm, though he knew it would do little good. "Grant, shut it off," Cole barked. "I'm trying," Grant shouted, his fingers flying across the console. "But it's not coming from the comms, it's coming from inside the pod." The temperature dropped suddenly, their breath visible in the freezing air. The walls of the pod groaned, the metal warping and twisting. Cole's heart pounded as he realized what was happening. "The rift," he muttered. "It's not just out there, it's inside us." Hallie's eyes widened in horror. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying we didn't escape it," Cole said, his voice grim. The Erebus was infected, corrupted. We've been exposed to it. It's spreading. The whispers grew louder, filling the pod with an oppressive noise that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. The lights dimmed further, plunging them into an eerie half-darkness. Something's coming, Reyes said, his voice trembling. The viewport began to fog over, a dark substance creeping across the glass from the outside. It moved like a living thing, tendrils of shadow slithering over the pod. The team watched in horror as the substance began to seep through the seams of the pod, dripping onto the floor. "Get back!" Cole shouted, pulling Hallie and Reyes away from the spreading darkness. Grant screamed as the substance touched his leg, burning through his uniform. He thrashed wildly, trying to pull away, but the shadow tendrils wrapped around him, dragging him toward the center of the pod. "Help me!" Grant screamed, his voice filled with terror. Cole fired his sidearm at the tendrils, but the bullets had no effect. Hallie grabbed a tool from the emergency kit and tried to cut Grant free, but the tendrils seemed to multiply, enveloping him completely. Grant's screams turned into guttural, inhuman sounds as the shadow consumed him. His body convulsed, then went still. When the tendrils receded, all that was left was a twisted, unrecognizable mass. "Oh my God!" Hallie whispered, tears streaming down her face. "What is this?" "The rift," Cole said, his voice hollow. "It's turning us into them." The pod shuddered again, the walls warping further. The shadow substance continued to seep in, moving toward the remaining crew. Cole realized they were running out of options. "We have to stop this," Cole said. "We can't let it reach anywhere else." "How?" Hallie asked, her voice shaking. "We're in a tin can in the middle of nowhere." "There's one way," Cole said, his jaw tightening. "We destroy the pod. Take the rift's corruption with us?" Reyes stared at him in disbelief. "You're talking about suicide?" "I'm talking about stopping this thing," Cole said. "If we don't, it'll spread to the next ship that comes looking for us, or worse, it'll find its way back to civilization." Hallie wiped her tears, nodding. "He's right. We can't let this thing leave." Reyes hesitated, then let out a shaky breath. "What do we need to do?" Cole grabbed the emergency manual override for the pod's reactor. "We overload the reactor, just like we did on the Erebus. It'll take out the pod, and us with it." The shadows were closing in, the whispers growing louder. Cole worked quickly, inputting the commands to destabilize the reactor. "Are you sure about this?" Hallie asked, her voice trembling. Cole looked at her, his expression resolute. "It's the only way." The reactor's warning lights flashed red, the pod systems blaring with alarms. The countdown began, 2 minutes until detonation. The shadows surged forward, their movements frantic as if they realized what was happening. The team stood together, their weapons drawn, ready to fight until the end. As the shadows engulfed the pod, the whispers reached a deafening crescendo. Cole gritted his teeth, his finger hovering over the final command. "For everyone out there," he said softly. "This ends here." The reactor detonated, a blinding light consuming the pod and everything within. The rift pulsed once, then fell silent, its swirling energy dimming as the corruption was destroyed. In the cold, empty void of space, only silence remained. The rift lingered, a dark, ominous scar on the fabric of the cosmos, but for now its reach was stopped. The sacrifice of the crew ensured that its horrors would not spread, at least, not yet.